so we'll go ahead and get started. Really, there are 5 key components when we talk about contract management. We're going to get into depth in each one of these. We're going to talk about relationship management. So that's the relationship between you and the vendor community, and how we can make sure that if you start off on the right foot, that everybody's on the same page, we can get those contracts running smoothly. We're going to talk about record keeping and how important that is to make sure that not only purchasing has everything in a contract file, but you know what should be in your file as a contract management. Then we're going to talk about administration, so things that happen during the life of the contract and how you administer those different things, how you monitor the contract, make sure that we're getting what we're paying for, making sure those vendors are doing what's in that scope of work. And then on the back end, just mediating risk as far as financial risk, legal risk, and other things on the back end of contracts. We at purchasing have implemented a couple of new processes and procedures as it relates to contract management. So we're going to also go through a couple of those new things that we have that we've implemented in an effort to help you keep up with contract management. But know that contract management is not held, the responsibility for that is not held at the purchasing office. It's actually held at the division level. So once we issue and award that contract, it's up to the division, department, OSHR, whoever it is, you know, we're the land of the misfit toys with all the different divisions. But whoever is managing that contract, it's up to you to keep up with how that contract is going. We will have some tools in place that we'll go over to help you do that, but that responsibility really lies at the division level. So first off, you have this contract. We've gone through all of the bid process or all of the entire complex sitting down to finally get you a finalized contract to then work with a vendor to complete whatever it is that you need. Our suggestion is always hold a kickoff meeting. That way, especially if you have a contract that's a 1 year with 2 optional renewals, which is our standard 3-year term, even longer than that we could have, we just need additional approvals. But build that relationship with the vendor. It took them a lot of work to get the contract. It took you a lot of work to put the contract together. We want to make sure that it runs smoothly and that we don't have to go out for bid again because something fell through and somebody didn't understand how this was going to work. So identify the roles and responsibilities. It could be that during the bid process, you had somebody that's a sales guy that actually submitted the bid, but he's not the technician that's going to work on the piece of equipment. So identify who's doing what, get those contact information and identify maybe they have somebody different that's doing billing. Maybe they have somebody different that's doing after hours calls, whatever that is. Identify your roles and responsibilities at the state level within your division of who's going to be involved in that contract, as well as getting those contacts from the vendor. Provide that information for each team member, email addresses, phone numbers, whatever it may be, and clarify the terms and conditions. If you have a landscape contract and it's not in that contract that they have to take care of the ants, they're not going to do it. So potentially you need to modify that contract to make sure that it has what you need and that everybody's on the same page as to when those delivery times are and things like that. Know that if you have additional steps that have to happen before the contract starts, maybe they have to order supplies. Maybe you guys have to get background checks on them. Maybe there's some kind of badging to get into the building for them to do the work, or maybe you have to be there to do the work. Work together with the vendor community to make sure that you get all of that done before they start work, and so that you have some kind of timetable as to when that contract stuff is going to happen. It's always good to establish goals and objectives. And really, you can start thinking about this stuff up front when we are drafting our solicitations. If there's certain things about they have to have background checks, or if there's certain things they have to have access to the building, maybe we're asking about that in the solicitation process. So also when we're developing those bids that are going on the street, when you're getting quotes even for small purchases, try to do some thinking about, well, if they're going to come in and paint this room, what all has to happen to make that happen? They have to have access to the building. They might have to move furniture. They might have to do all of that. And by establishing what is all going to happen to make your service or your goods happen, up front, they quote better. One, you're going to get a quote that doesn't need to be changed. You're going to get a contract together that doesn't need to be changed. So make sure and think about the total cost of ownership when you're asking for goods and services. So we talk about record keeping. We at the purchasing office, we hold your contract file. So we hold everything. We're going to go over what is in that file, what we have access to. At procurement, we have the purchasing file. So that has to do with everything that happened up front to be able to get you this contract. It's up to you to also keep contract management files. So the importance of record keeping really establishes the roles and responsibilities of everybody involved. It also ensures that if you had checklist monitoring of deliverables, any kind of compliance with the terms and conditions, all of that is documented. It also acts as a reliable source to hold the vendor accountable and to hold you accountable for how that's supposed to work. And so when we have any disputes in contract, the first thing we do is, what does the contract say? So make sure that your contract and everything is laid out. It very well may be that we have to amend that contract to make sure that it's clear what those roles and responsibilities are. It also helps with risk mitigation, right? So it helps identify and reduce potential legal and financial risks. So if we didn't ask them to take care of the ants, all of a sudden now you have an ant problem, you need them to take care of the ants. We want to make sure that we get the right record and documentation to says, okay, now we need to add this to the contract so the ants are taken care of. And that finance is then solidified in all of that record keeping. The other big thing about record keeping is know when your contract starts and know when your contract ends. I think Denise and I just got an email about that because her record looks different than my record. So then we're able to go back through all the documentation to really solidify, okay, this is when the contract started. They started a work on this date, but this is when the contract was executed and actually started. So all of that is very important to know when your renewal terms are and all of that. And the best way to do it is to have record keeping. We do a lot of our record keeping at purchasing using Excel spreadsheets and things like that. You all know that when you have a contract that's getting ready to expire, we'll reach out to you and say, hey, this is coming up for expiration. We literally are using spreadsheets to help us keep up with that. So what is included in a contract? The contract documents include any fully executed solicitation documents. So we all know that if we go over $29,000, which is the state's small purchase threshold, we have to get the vendor to sign the terms and conditions. So we actually have a document, which is either an IFB for goods and services, simple goods and services, an RFP, which is for complex goods and services, or an RFQ, which we use for waivers, or from $29,000 to $50,000, where we just can get quotes. So to get the vendor to sign those terms and conditions. So any of those types of documents included, if we're just doing a small purchase and you get a quote, that becomes also part of the contract and file. The North Carolina terms and conditions for anything over that $29,000, any addendums. So addendums happen when we make changes during the bid process, during the solicitation process. All of those become part of the contract. If we did go out for bid, what the vendor submitted back, so the vendor's proposal, the best and final offers, which is used during negotiations and requests for clarification. That happens all during the evaluation stage of a bid. And then once a bid is awarded, usually our office sends a certification of award, OSHR, you guys send your own, to the vendor that says very outline, this is the vendor that has this contract, this is how much money it is, here's the terms, things like that. Any amendments, changes that happen throughout the life of the contract, renewal agreements. So renewals are written ahead of time into the term. So those are separate than a regular amendment that could extend a contract. A renewal is written up front. It's usually just a memo that's sent to the vendor that we all agree to exercise that next year of the contract. And then your purchase orders. So all the purchase orders that happen throughout the life of that contract, you could have multiple purchase orders. So all of that makes your contract file, right? So that's what procurement is holding on to, is all your POs and all these other documents. That's what's in our file. So what should be in your file? Not only those contract documents, but then email traffic back and forth between the vendor, any reports that they send you for that contract, any shipping documents, your purchase orders, your invoices, receipt of billing documents, any performance reviews, inspections, testing, however that works within that particular contract. Contract modification. So if we've done any addendums, did you go out and get quotes? How did you decide that you needed to do that addendum? What triggered that change? Any of that kind of documentation. A list of any state furnished property or information. So if it's an IT procurement, what do they have access to as far as our systems? If it is I don't know, if they're coming to paint this room and you had to get them badged, when do you get that badge back? Who has that badge? If they're a janitorial contract, who are the individuals that are in this building for security purposes that have badges to have access? So not just access to physical property, but also access to data, access to anything. So you have a list of it. So when that contract ends, you can make sure and pull all that back and get all of that. So administration of the contract. So just know it is your responsibility as a contract administrator to track the deliverables. Once we cut that PO, we at purchasing, we're like, we're good to go. We're done. Now it's on to you. We tell the vendor in that certification of award, okay, we're done with you. We have awarded this. Now you can talk to this person. So we pass that off to the division to actually then administer the contract. So make sure you know what's in those terms and conditions of that contract. Make sure you know what's in the scope of work or specifications if it's a particular product, so that you know what you ordered, so you can then monitor that it is the correct thing or that you're getting the correct services. Confirm deliverables. We should have in every single one of our statement of work some kind of deliverable. If you don't have a deliverable, well, now we're in the consultant work. We should always have some kind of deliverable of some sort, whether it's training, a service, or whatnot. You're getting something. If you're just having a vendor come in and review a program for you and give you their expertise, that's a consultant service. But if they're actually doing something, you should have something that confirms that they did what they said they were going to do. Because that way you can say, yes, I've received this in e-procurement, therefore they can invoice for it, therefore we can pay them. And we have all the proof that we actually received those services. You also monitor any delivery times, instructions. If you don't have a loading dock and you just ordered 500 batteries that each weigh 25 pounds, probably should tell the vendor that, because they're going to need something to get them into the building. So just be thinking about always cognitively, how is this whole project going to work? If I'm coming to paint this building, I need to know that I have to move furniture. So that can reduce those number of addendums. Make sure that if you have tasks that you guys have checklists, say task 1 was done, task 2 was done. And a good way to keep up with that is if you blanket out into e-procurement, if it is something standard where it's a phased project, and they are then able to bill, know that by the time you hit, I receive this, I don't care if you're buying pens. When you hit receive in e-procurement, it says that it's now your problem. You have received it. If something's wrong with it, you have reviewed it. There should be nothing wrong with it. You're good to go. They can invoice you and you're done. If you do not hit receive, if you get a box from FSI that's ginormous and you don't check that everything's in there and you go ahead and receive all in e-procurement, it's your problem. It's no longer their problem. As soon as you hit receive, it allows the vendor to then invoice you for it. So make sure that you're keeping up and tracking. Did they complete all those tasks? Did I get all of these different commodities that I ordered? And monitor throughout the life of a contract. So that ensures compliance and progress throughout the entire thing. So if you have a term that's over 3 years, Make sure you're still keeping up with it. If you just have somebody that's supposed to be coming every week to do something, check with them, make sure that it's happening. Don't just be cutting checks, right? To conduct inspections if you need to. If there are certain things, we know our good guys at facilities, we do lots of inspections to make sure that those vendors are doing what they're supposed to be doing. It is also your responsibility to approve payment. So a lot of different divisions have different mechanisms they use and different approvals that they have to go through before that invoice gets put into our invoice approval system that then gets to accounting to cut the vendor a check. Those approvals are important. When you are approving an invoice, that means that you got what you wanted, you got what you needed, and everything's good to go, and now we can pay them. So when we get into monitoring a contract, if there is a problem, don't approve an invoice. If you can't get on the same page with a vendor, why are we paying them? If there are still outstanding problems, let's fix problems before we just keep cutting checks, right? So just make sure that one of those mechanisms that we can use to help get what we're paying for is withholding those payments until we actually get it. But it's your responsibility. We at purchasing don't know if it's going well. It's up to you guys. It's also up to you to manage change. So if you're the only one that knows, hey, there's an ant problem, I need to now go get an amendment done so I can add them to fix the ants. If it is not written down, it didn't happen. And so when the invoice comes in to fix the ants, if it doesn't match the PO, there's a very good possibility we're not paying for that because it's not on the PO. So with that, know that any amendments may also have to be fixed in the back end with our accounting stuff. You might have to do a change order for your PO to make sure that if you added an amendment, we either did a separate PO just for that amendment, or we added a line or whatever it may be within the accounting system so that when we're now getting an invoice for that piece of the amendment, it all matches. Because that's part of that record keeping. We talk about renewals and extensions on the norm. I'm not saying every time, but on the norm, if you have a 1-year contract with 2 optional renewals, we usually issue a new PO for every year of the contract. We do that because it's up to us whether we want to opt to use that renewal. If you go ahead and write it on the PO, you're encumbering those funds, even though they're future funds. If you decide not to, now we have to go back and change the PO. So normally at the time of renewal, we cut a new PO for those services. Your vendor should know that and make sure that when they get the renewal and they agree upon it, that they're invoicing with the new PO. So that our accounting department can associate the right invoice to the right POs, things like that. So just be aware of that. So renewals are written into the initial term. So usually 1 year, 2 optional renewals. Extensions are, I've run out of renewals or I've run out of my term that was approved up front. Now I need to extend additional time. That's done on an amendment. So renewals, standard term for the state agency level is 3 years. That's what I can approve in-house to move forward. We can do contracts that are longer than that. We just have to justify it and get approvals up front as to why we want an extended term. I know OSHR has a lot that has a longer term for that. And like our IT services have a lot longer term. So we approve that because it's a pain to get an IT done. So yeah, optional renewals are built in the initial term. Renewals are solely up to you. There are many reasons why you would not use a renewal. You don't have any more funding. You no longer need this. The vendor's terrible. I don't know, maybe pricing has changed or the vendor's asking for more money, so you decide to go out for bid. There's all kinds of reasons why we don't opt. Our office does our best to reach out to you 3 months before renewals, 4 months if we know it's got to go back out for bid. So usually we can get a renewal done pretty quickly, but definitely within 3 months. If we got to go back out for bid, hopefully we can get it done in 4 months. The state will then maybe generate a new purchase order. Amendments are different. Amendments are used to change anything. So if we need to change costs, if we need to add the ants to be done, if we need to change scope or rates, any of that can be done on an amendment. Just know that if anything changes in a contract, it has to be written down, has to go through procurement to make it official that it has changed. So if you have anything like that, your first stop is to reach out to us and say, hey, this is happening. What do we do? So monitoring performance. So throughout the life of the contract, it's also up to you as a contract manager to monitor that contract according to the scope. So whatever's in that scope of work, according to that quote, that solicitation document, whatever's in that is what you're holding the vendor liable for. If you need to create yourself checklists to do that, that task 1 is done, by all means, keep up with it, make sure it's in your contract management file. And if it, like I said, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So document, document, document. After you inspect any goods, notify the vendor, and you can notify them email. I believe there is a way that you can also tag it in e-procurement that says this is a rejected item. You only click rejected if it's broken or it wasn't the right item. Damaged goods, inaccurate order, or late shipment, I suggest you pick up the phone or email and talk to the vendor about it and say what's happening. Risk or loss of the goods is on the vendor until you hit receive. So if something happens in the shipping situation, it's on the vendor to fix it. But the minute you hit receive, now it's your problem. Measure performance based on the specifications that's in your contract and monitor throughout the entire life of the contract. Ensure the receipt of all the deliverables before you get that final report and payment. If we are paying somebody to fix the elevators and they still haven't fixed the elevators and the contract is done and you sent them their final payment, they're not coming back to fix the elevators. Now it's the new vendor's problem. And it can cost you even more money because that wasn't covered, right? So just know that before the final is done, before you close that contract out, that everything is done to then submit final payment. One of the new things that we're doing, I know that some of you are probably getting bombarded with emails from our lovely Gary Clayton about performance. This is a new procedure that we're doing. We are issuing a survey. So every month I give Gary a list of these are our contracts that are current 6 months into their current term. So it's 6 months. He sends you a survey that just says, how's it going? How's it going? How's that contract going? Do you have any problems with invoicing? Do you have any problems with performance? Do you have any problems with anything? And then you can say, no, everything's great. And you circle everything that says, yeah, everything's great. Or if you circle, yeah, this is a problem, there's an area down at the bottom that you can kind of list out. If Gary sees anything that says, yeah, this is a problem, he's sending it to me. I'll reach out and say, what can we do to help you fix your problem? So it's literally letting us know what your tools are that you can use, how we can help you fix the problem as far as vendor warnings, vendor complaints, things like that. Have you paid them? What's really getting to the issue? Maybe we just need to set up another meeting with the vendor so that we can all get on the same page. Let's look at your contract and see what it says. You don't have a right to complain about that because it's not in the contract. So it's really just kind of triggering you. So we're getting a great response back from those surveys. Keep that up. That is something that is very unique to DOA that we've taken from I don't know, out of our brainchild to be able to try to keep up with it and try to help you keep up with the actual monitoring of those contracts. So it's going to be very interesting to see the data. We've already seen where we sent a vendor complaint based on a survey that we got back, and they were on it. It ran all the way up the food chain of that vendor, and they fixed the problem. So that's our hope, is that we then let you guys know in the field, these are our steps to fix those problems. So if we do have a vendor complaint, the biggest thing there again, and I'm going to put it in all caps, document, document, document. Document what emails you've sent to them, document what phone calls you've had with them, have the vendor send you back, yes, I received this email where I've told you it's a problem, because the biggest thing is we have to give the vendor the opportunity to fix the problem, right? We have to give them an action to cure whatever the problem is. So we do at DOA, we're also unique that we have a vendor complaint policy and procedures. It is posted on the fiscal management website. It is attached in every solicitation document that goes out on the street. So the vendors know what our policies and procedures are for handling complaints because it's in that policy. That policy outlines what my responsibility is at purchasing, what the vendor's responsibility as a vendor with the state, and what your responsibility is as a contract administrator. So if you haven't looked at that policy, make sure you know what's in there. It kind of is a 4 strikes you're out situation. So we want you to handle a problem at the division level. If you get to where you can't handle the problem, you're not getting any fixes, come to us. From there, we can send the vendor a letter, a formal vendor complaint. That formal vendor complaint is going to outline, this is what your contract says. This is where we find you in breach of contract. That usually gets the wheels going when they see that. Hey, if you don't answer me within 10 days, I have the right to terminate this. If you don't agree with the response or agree with this complaint, it also gives the vendor the opportunity to come back and respond to that vendor complaint. We can then have a meeting, everybody can get together. Again, it takes a lot of work to set these contracts up. We want to make sure everybody has a voice, and we want it to keep going because we don't want to have to do it again. So all that process is outlined in that policy. Make sure you check it out. If a contract does get to the point where it's terminated and it's over our delegation of $100,000 for the total term, we will also reach out to PNC and tell them, hey, we're terminating this contract. Here's all of our documentation as to why. So, right, we have to have all that documentation that says this is why we're terminating this contract. So all of that should be in your file as the contract administrator. We might ask you for that if you're coming at me with a vendor wanting a formal vendor complaint. My first question is, what do you have documented where you've tried to fix the problem, right? PNC, DIT both have vendor performance evaluations and templates on their website. So if you don't know how to put together an inspection or what to look for, if you simply Google North Carolina procurement and contracts, you can go on their website. They have a lot of tools out there for you to use. Same thing with DIT, state procurement evaluation templates. If we do get to the point where we have to terminate a contract, we have 2 different types of terminations, and they are both written into our standard North Carolina terms and conditions. So the standard terms and conditions that the vendor agrees to if we go over $29,000. First is for convenience. So we could have something such as the History Museum is getting ready to be redone. They're getting ready to have a major construction. So we had to terminate all of our contracts where we were doing services within that history museum because it's going to be unoccupied. So we could terminate for convenience. Starting on this date, we do have to give them notice that says, you have till this date, send your final bill here, but we're terminating because the building's going under construction. Termination for cause could be that we found the vendor in breach of contract. So that is where we do still give notice. Usually it could be immediate if it's something, I don't know, if somebody's stealing something or something to that effect, or it could be for cause you didn't answer your vendor complaint. It could be that we're still having problems, therefore we're going to give you the 30 days worth of notice and now we're done and we're going to go back out for bid because you can't do what's in your scope of work. Either way, again, we have to have the documentation of past performance and failure to cure. We have to document. We gave them the opportunity to fix the problem before we can just go and terminate. So within our policy, we have, if they fail to meet the terms of the vendor complaint, if a vendor receives 3 failing inspection ratings within the 6-month period, for convenience, or where a vendor is found in default or cause. Those are really what's listed for termination. Notices of termination would come from the procurement office, and it would include the reasoning for that termination. So now you've had this contract and it's all going on, and hopefully we're going to reach out to you 4 months because it's getting ready to end. 3 months if you got renewals, but even at the time of renewal, but really at the time of the end of a contract is your time to review what has happened. Make sure that your file is up to date. Our files are public record, and because you work for the state, potentially yours could be too if we ever ended up in court. So just know that your file on that complete contract needs to be all together, and make sure that you follow any record retention. For us at purchasing, it is 5 years after expiration of the contract. So I suggest that you probably hold on to your files that term as well. So 5 years after expiration. At closeout is a good time to review and evaluate that you got all of the deliverables and initial requirements that were done. Collect all your data and your equipment that you had given access to the vendors. Finalize all disputes. Like I said, they're not coming back to fix the elevators. Finalize all that before you give final payment. Archive and keep up with that retention record. Make sure that you issue final payment if you took a, what is that thing called? Performance bond. If you took a performance bond at the beginning, then you're going to have to issue that in the back end on the end. So all of that, make sure you're keeping up with your performance bond records. And that you know that you potentially would have to issue that back to the vendor at the end of the term of that contract. And then learn, document and learn. I will tell you that if you have a problem during the term of the contract, or you see where there could be some areas within your scope of work that could be shored up, we are happy to help you do that before we put it back out on the street. Anything that we can make more clear, any kind of, reports that could help you out, or any of that. We can shore up that document as much as you want. We just got to have time to do it. So when we reach out 4 months beforehand, we're happy to come in, meet with you guys, sit down, go line by line of that contract and help you shore it up to make sure that you get what you need. If you have any additional tasks that need to happen before the end of that term or even after that term, know that we'd have to amend the contract to extend to allow for those additional ongoing job or tasks. So then we could potentially be in a waiver situation to get those extra pieces needed, or we just needed to amend to extend. So all of that happens at the end. So some common challenges we see and risks in contract management is that you guys weren't aware. I know our internal auditor, which I'm going to let her speak here in a little bit. I'm going to get her to come off mute. But she was reaching out to some of our divisions about, hey, what are y'all doing for contract management? Can I see your files and things like that? And their answer was, Meredith handles that. And that is not the answer. So make sure that's a lot of the reason why we're having this course today is so that you know what your roles and responsibilities were. Have that documentation. Make sure that they're in compliance with any rules, any laws, things like that. I know that there's plenty of OSHA laws that are written into our contract. So it's up to you to make sure they're in compliance with all the laws that relate to that contract. Any misalignment of goals. I know we've had some changing of guards here lately. So maybe somebody was really passionate about this and the next person isn't. Know that then potentially we don't need to renew this contract. Know what the goals are from your upper management on all of your contracts. Inefficient communication. If you're not telling them what the problem is, there's no way for them to know. If you're not telling procurement that there's a problem, we don't know. So make sure that you're communicating how that contract is going and make sure you're monitoring it through the whole life of the contract. It could delay payments for the vendor. So that could potentially be a risk too for them. And it could delay your timelines in completing your projects. So just some best practice for effective contract management, just document clearly, ensure all the terms, conditions, and obligations are documented to avoid any misunderstandings. Regular reviews, conduct periodic evaluations of contract performance and adherence to identify any areas where you could improve. And then a timely closeout. Make sure that you know what the dates are of your contract so that you are preparing. If this has got to go back out for bid, Sometimes it takes a while to get an RFP on the street. Sometimes it takes a while to get something like an IT purchase completed. So if you're timely on all of that, we can help you move that timeline in the best way that we can. Implement a structured process. So it's fine if you guys want to document within your divisions. Like if I'm a contract manager, this is what I do. This is what's in, and you're going to get a copy of this presentation. Use that as a checklist if you want to, of what needs to be in your contracts. That is all I have. The only other thing is that our DOA internal auditor, I don't know if you can see Tabitha and take her off mute. She is going to be issuing surveys out to all of the DOA contract administrators to determine any areas where you potentially have risk in your contract management policies and procedures to help you mediate that risk and give you some things. So it's really based on this course. It's kind of the same questions as what's in your contract files, what's in this kind of stuff.
We do have one question before we get to Tabitha. Elizabeth Bolden wanted to know, do these new surveys mean that she can stop doing the monthly contract evaluation reports?
That is an internal procedure with state surplus.
Okay.
So they'd have to make that decision there.
Okay.
So yeah,
Elizabeth, did you hear that?
if that's what she's talking about. I do send to each director every month, here are the contracts that we are currently working on. So that has been assigned to one of the guys in our office, which are here, or then what we have as far as our records is coming soon. So every month we send those reports to the directors who then can disperse amongst their division to say, okay, and I know the facility guys, we meet monthly to go through that report and update together. So hopefully that helps out. We're happy to do that with any of our other divisions, OSHR, whoever, that if you want to meet on a monthly and we can just update that together when I send that report out, I'm happy to do that too. So we can go through it together, but I know it takes you time to hit all your different contract admins.
Okay, Tabitha, you should be able to speak now. Tabitha?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Meredith. This is a project Meredith and I have been working on, and we really will appreciate your input through this process. I know they say that it's your responsibility to manage your contract, but you don't have to go it alone. We want to support you and make sure that you have controls in place to manage your contract successfully. So Meredith and I put together a questionnaire that we're working with the COM team to push it out to all the contract managers. We would like to get your honest feedback. If you want us to review your process, we'll be glad to do that. But we also want to meet you where you are and support you through the process. If there are any gaps, we will work with you to put controls in place based on best practices. So if there's any question, I'll be glad to answer. But and when you get the survey, just let us know if you need more information. And Mary, did I forget anything?
Nope, sounds good.
Okay, thank you so
All right,
much.
thank you. Yeah.
Tabitha. Okay, let me go back to the chat and see if we have any other questions. Nope, that's it. Does anybody else have any questions?
As always, feel free to reach out for us for anything procurement, contract wise. Our information is here. Martina handles all e-procurement access as well as our hub liaison. So she's very integral in this piece. If you are working with a hub vendor, if we ever have complaints or warnings or anything like that, and it is a hub vendor, we like to copy the hub office and give them the opportunity to come in and help us work out any issues with a hub vendor to try to keep that contract going. So Martina is our hub liaison, and then she works with the hub office to make sure that those different contacts are added. Sandra and Lisa are my contract administrators. Know that Sandra deals with anything P cards as well. And then Lisa, I don't think I mentioned because I forgot to, change orders. So we have new change order forms that are within the fiscal website. They're on the same site as the P card forms. Gail and Joey's team has been integral in helping us set up these SharePoint forms, and that is going to help us with compliance and making sure that we're tracking every change order in a list instead of going back and forth over email. So those are new. You should have gotten, not new. They've been out there now for several months, but Lisa manages our change orders and manages the bucket for those change orders coming through. So if you need to add money, take money off, start an amendment process, all of that needs to happen through the change order forms, as well as there's a closeout form that allows you at the end of the year, we're getting ready, we're fastly approaching that. Know that at the end of the year, your closeouts now, instead of being sent via email, are going to be sent on those forms where it allows you to upload a spreadsheet of all your closeouts. So budget, I'm sure we'll be reaching out to help you set all of that up, but use those change order forms. They're on the fiscal website. Gary manages all of our state term contract purchases, and he's managing now that contract monitoring surveys. So if you have any questions on that, you can reach out to him.
We do have another question.
Okay.
Do you recommend controls for 60-day contracts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, even if it's a spot buy, something that you're buying once, you still need to manage some kind of control to make sure you're getting what you're paying for. So if it's you said 60-day, I mean, I don't think it has to be intense, but there still needs to be some kind of management, whether it's a checklist or even if you're just managing by putting in comments and receiving on a PO, somewhere that tracks that for that record keeping is a good idea.
Okay, hang on, let me, okay, a lot of thank yous.
All right. Hope y'all have a good week.
Hey, Meredith.
Yeah. Thanks for joining.
So Meredith, now that we're off, I have one quick question. I want to hold up everything. For the performance bond, let's say a vendor does not receive their performance bond for whatever reason. What should that vendor do if they don't receive their performance bond?
They should reach out to their contract administrator to then figure out why they haven't received it.
But if the vendor has performed to standards, they're pretty much guaranteed to get that performance.
Yeah, I would say, unless there's some reason, like if it went towards, the contract was terminated or there was all of that. If it was terminated, that would be listed in there. If there's vendor complaints, that potentially could have an effect on that. If there is something that they didn't do within the contract, let's say, we have our major maintenance. If they didn't do it or they didn't do it and we had to bring somebody in, we could use a piece of that performance bond. So there are reasons why we use that, but it's all documented as to why. So it's not an automatic, because it's used if there is some kind of lapse in performance.
Or if there isn't an issue and they perform to extreme satisfaction.
Yeah, then they should get it back, yeah. Mhm. I don't think there would be a reason.
Have we, and this probably wasn't your area, but as far as, how we were talking about performance bonds, if they do, if we keep it, have we clarified how it comes back to us?
I don't know that. That's a accounting situation, yeah.
So as Prentice, because we've been asked, if they don't receive the performance bond, of course, like Meredith said, some of the dollars could be used for a quick cleanup, have someone come in and do a quick cleanup, right? But outside of that, if it's $700 and the performance bond was $3,000, then where did the other funds go? Does it go back to?
If they're terminated, as we discussed back when we have terminated somebody, we've kept their performance bond because we were terminated. So it could be used for total cost of ownership, right? So now I have to go back out for bid before we were supposed to. There's things like that. If we're not terminating a contract, then yes, then they would receive they could receive a portion back. But if we get into a termination, they can forfeit their entire performance bond. That's what it says in our contracts now. Yep. We good to go? Anybody else?
A couple pretty remedial questions, so but
Okay.
that's because that's where I'm at, so. You talked about the difference like between extensions, renewals, and amendments.
Mhm.
And what I'm seeing in our files is the word, they're all used pretty much as amendment.
Okay.
Should we try to separate them so? that-
No, I mean, it doesn't necessarily, lots of people, lots of departments use the amendment template to exercise renewals and everything. An extension would be an amendment document, but now like sometimes on yours, PNC makes it extension 1 instead of amendment 7.
It's kind
Right.
of easier to track in a way what happened to it if you're putting it down in
As
order,
an
like a
amendment,
filing
yeah.
system.
It-
So you know what, this happened, this is happening here, this is happening
Yeah,
here. by
it is
name.
totally, that is a preference.
Okay, but so it's okay if we choose, if.
Yeah, if you
Our
choose to do it that
organization-
way, that is totally fine. Yeah, I would say on the majority of the stuff we do for facilities, which is the majority of our renewals and stuff, we send a memo and then we keep it as a renewal separate outside of an amendment. So, but that's strictly that's a preference. There's no rules or laws. or
Not
processes
using the
for that.
word amendment every time is okay.
Correct. That way, it's fine if you did, but it's fine if you didn't. So.
And I think the process was they used amendment 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that kept them in order, but it doesn't necessarily what. the
Which I
action
think for
is.
yours that are, when we're talking about a term that's 10 years or 7 years or 5 years, it's a whole lot different than a 3-year term where you can kind of keep up with that a little easier. For yours that have these larger terms, I think it's up to you, but I would say, yes, if you're keeping them amendment 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you know what each amendment is for, then but it's up to you.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah, just-
care.
And so the other thing was, so if you have a contract and we've got a scope of work, and I think this has come up recently because I sent an email to you about what we needed to do because we were going to go over the limit, the $25,000 limit, what they wanted to do to the add-ons. And they're looking at trying to do something different so they actually get below that amount. Do we need to change anything? Because now our scope of work has kind of changed. If we're going to say that certain things that we said we wanted are,
So we need
we're
to
going to forego
amend
them.
to change the scope. Yep. So here's the problem is that was not done as a contract because it was under 25,000.
If we don't, that's fine. I just want to make sure because I think it's.
There's nothing saying that we can't amend
But,
original
so at least
quote.
it shows why.
So it's documented. We can
Right.
use an amendment to document what we're changing.
Because you said we should monitor our services. And so
Yes.
I want the expectation to be what it is now.
Yeah,
not
so
what it
if
was 4
it's
months ago.
different, and especially if it's going to change the PO, we're gonna have to do a change order on a PO, and if you want documented what is changing, we can still use a amendment document to change that. Or we cancel our current service and go and get a new quote for what we're doing. So it's really, because it's under that 25,000 for an IT purchase.
So let's say that they're not able to do that and they go over the 25,000. I mean, it's can't.
So if we're over 25,000, we're in a different boat.
So we're going to cancel the service and go out for another bid. But we need the service because,
Or you could amend to add additional services that then takes you over. Then we are amending through DIT. But they want to see the original quote as well. So
so that's the
it's
problem.
like a weird thing, yes. And I've actually asked PNC today. DIT is different. But you have options there.
Okay.
If you're changing and you're not just adding services, that gets weird too. So if you're changing what you initially had done,
That's
not
what
just adding to it, then that makes a little weird too. So that's like a one-off. Yeah, we'll figure it out. I'm happy to meet with whoever you need to meet with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You have a question? No? All good? Awesome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.